one of the things that we've been trying to do from the beginning of this series is to keep recapping. And I really wanted to just spend a moment on a praxis issue, because I think sometimes, people aren't sure why we keep doing this. So I just want to be, kind of clear and say that it's part of our feminist methodology that we use, which is, as humans, we gain knowledge actually by storytelling. And we do it by hearing the same stories again and again in different ways, in slightly different ways. That's how we build layers of knowledge in our lives. That's how children do it as well. They listen, then they take a little bit in, maybe a couple more sentences. Again, they build on that knowledge. And that's what we're really trying to do over this 18 months is, by the time we get to November, December this year, there's a lot of times that you've had access to the same kinds of information. Then we're building new sets that go into that body of knowledge. And by the end, hopefully it feels like you've really integrated it. Because the worst thing is when you hear something just once and to me, that's not knowledge. That's not the gaining of wisdom. That's just information coming at us. And I think for us in the modern world, there's enough of that anyway. So that's why we do the recap and add in this way. So let's just quickly go through these slides. As you'll see, we won't stop very long on them. But just to say, what feminism, if feminism is, as we say here, that it helps us to break that which is unjust, what is tough and hard and sad in our lives. If it helps us to end bad old systems and to build new ones, then that's what we're trying to do as well in terms of this work on economics. And hopefully what we can do is we can find ways to make up for the fact that many of us haven't had the right glasses on through our primary school and our secondary school, and for many of us, even at tertiary level. Because even if you've done economics, sometimes you're doing economics in a way that's not helpful for your own life anyway. You're doing it from a very mainstream approach, and it might not be intended for you. It might be intended for someone who is in a very private sector environment, for instance, and you might be in a not-for-profit environment, or you might be interested in gender justice. And when they're doing the work on economics, you feel like it doesn't relate to you in your life. So again, this is about putting on new frames, cleaning the cataracts off your eyes, trying to see the world in all its colors, and let's see how that helps us. The next thing is that we always talk about the praxis, the action and reflection cycles. And again, we do that because it's about making sure that when we're taking on this set of work, whether it's on economics or something else, that we do come from a position where we say, I know what I'm talking about. I've been in poverty and therefore I have a lot to say about poverty. Or I've had a lot of work to do with money and how we distribute money through communities. So what we're trying to do is stop the idea of there only being certain kinds of experts like economists and say we are all experts, because this is about money and resources moving through systems, whether they're the formal systems or they're our informal systems where we're trying to find money because we've got to go to a rugby game, or we're trying to find money because there's a songo in my village, or we're trying to find money because I do the accounts in a CSO. So whatever our situation is, we are the experts. And then the next thing to say is, we've got to make sure that all of this work that's been done by those who come before us, that we're building on that. And one of the ways to do that is, let's always remember the things like the Beijing Platform for Action. And let's remember that it's been 25 years and that all those sets of, 12 different areas of interest, they all apply to economics as well. So for instance, if we want to talk about education and training, we should also be speaking back to the state. We should be speaking to schools and universities and saying, why is this not something that we're taught? And we should be talking about it in terms of violence against women. One of the reasons why women take so long to get out of situations of violence is because they often don't have the finances. They feel like either it's they themselves who'll be in trouble when they leave, they have nowhere to go, they don't even know where they're going to pay their rent when they leave, or it might be that they're thinking about their children and they're saying, but I've looked after this child for the last 5 years. I've been at home, working in the home. I don't have a stable job. He's just going to tell the judge that it's all my fault and that I'm using him for his money. So there's all these things that are going through someone's head that are all about economics. They're about what we call the microeconomics of life. So you have the micro, which is very close to you, yourself, in your home, in your household and your kinship network. Then you have the meso, what we call MESO, mesoeconomics, which is a little bit broader, which is around the district, the national, the regional. And then we have what we call macroeconomics. And macroeconomics is about the movement of resources and money through the global system. And all of those are connected, right? So everything, the policies that are being made on women's lives to do with violence, for instance, they might be made by UN Women, but they have a ripple effect all the way through down into our individual relationships. And the same, that we should be able to influence what is happening at the global level. And one of the things, for instance, that might come out of a poverty network, a set of women working on poverty, is they might come up with some kind of idea about economics and money to do with violence against women. They might say, we need A, B, and C, because we're the ones who've experienced it. We know what is needed, and that can then help with national policy to influence regional and to influence global. So that's one of the things, is we're always trying to make sure that flow is there and real, because it's what makes policy real or not. So then just keep looking through all of the Beijing Plus 25. You can find this report online. And that's why I really encourage you, if you want to know what's happening in your region, if you want to know what's happening in the Pacific, when you put together the data and analysis on all kinds of women, it's in these documents, in these reports, like the Beijing Plus 25 review of progress. These reviews of progress, they tend to come out every 5 years. So they're a good tool for us to use in the region. Yep. Okay. So let's move on and just say, remember our context. Always, always, always be clear that we're speaking from the place where we live, because it gives us the lived authority. It makes it easier for us to speak about our expertise. So what are the things around economics, for instance, that come because we are a small island state or a large ocean state? I mean, just look at where we are. We cover 30% of the surface of the Earth, right? In the Pacific Ocean, around 30%. And that means what? Of course, we're going to have huge amounts of knowledge, influence, and a willingness to work on oceans. That means also that we must be able to talk about the economics of fisheries. One of the most wonderful sets of work on economics, I think, by Pacific people has been when we've pushed back against many of the industrialized countries when we're talking about how much we should get in return for our fisheries. Whether it's for the big boats that are coming into our region, or whether it's for the fisheries rights themselves. We had to negotiate very, very hard over the last 15, 20 years to make sure that we got a better price per ton for our tuna. Now, that's important for all kinds of reasons. Just the immediate return that we get, right, here in our large ocean states, but also because we're making a case to the world that what happens in our oceans is the business of Pacific people. So that's an economics argument. Already you're making an argument on the basis of finance, of trade, and of all those asymmetrical or unequal relationships. We should be talking about that. And then if you bring it down just a little bit more, what about all of the women, and some of you I know are on this call today, who are working on aquaculture? You might be harvesting freshwater mussels, and you want to be clear on what's the best possible price that you can get. And you might say to your fisheries department, what's the best prices that we're getting through the rest of the Pacific? I want to know what is possible. Are there things that you can help me with? Certain kinds of technical equipment or expertise that help me to get my price to rise more? Who is the best market for my freshwater mussels? Who am I not being able to access right now? Are there problems with my infrastructure or with my transport? Many things that could be happening. So all of those things are about context and conditions, local conditions, and they're about society, about economics, and about ecology. So enough on that one, but to say it's very important to talk about context. Now, what about this one? If someone was to say, Noelene, what's economics got to do with violence against women? I've already given you one example, but if you look at this power and control wheel, and I really urge you to look for this power and control wheel online. I think we're going to talk about it again at the next Freeskool, because we're doing some work on SOGISEC and SRHR. But look at this, one of the pizza pie slices is on using economic abuse. So what are the ways that people hold each other under control? What's the way that we do that to other bodies, right? One of the ways we do it is by preventing that person, whether it's a woman, man, gender non-binary person, we prevent them from getting or keeping a job. Sometimes it's directly, right? You might punch their eye so that they have a black eye so they can't go to the interview. Or it might be more subtle, where you put obstacles in their way. You don't give them their bus fare. You make sure they don't have the economic means to go to their work. There's all kinds of ways that people use power and control to stop people from economic justice in their lives. Making him or her ask for money, giving him or her an allowance, you know, saying, oh, you have this amount. And often you'll give something that's not enough. It might not really be how much, you know, you can give to them, but you just give them a little tiny amount because it keeps them close to you and it keeps them controlled. We all know this. I'm not telling you anything new. Taking the money, not letting them know about money, not letting them have access to a family income. There's many ways. So I just wanted to demonstrate that even on this issue, you can see that, just as feminists have said for decades, everything is connected and everything is about social, economic, ecological, and climate justice. So that's about power and control. And I'm sure you can discuss next Friday many other ways that this is the case. You know, it's all kinds of things, like it might be that you destroy or you threaten to destroy some property. That's also about economics. If you don't have the money to replace whatever it is they've broken, then they've already had another economic impact on your life, as well as all the other impact they're having. And I just wanted to you know, think about this incredible slide that we keep coming back to, you know, and we use this slide so that we remind ourselves of the urgency of the work that we're doing together. That climate change is about so much more than just saying, oh, the climate is changing and that's bad for plants and that's bad for us as humans. Sometimes we're not even sure, you know, what those reasons are until we experience it ourselves. But really to also think of this from an economic standpoint and to say, what happens to us when our environment changes? What happens when a forest is no longer there? What happens if you live off the coast of, I don't know, Ngamea or somewhere, and you have a really wonderful reef? And that reef is where you get a lot of your fisheries, right? And then you sell it to us here in Vitilevu. What happens if that coral reef starts to die off? And every season or every other season, it's getting too hot for the coral, and you start to see changes. That's not just about pain and loss and damage and the loss of those beautiful environment. It's not just about tourism. It might be about many other things that are economic that come to you because of the health of that ecosystem. So it's incredibly connected, isn't it? And that's one of the things we have to do more and more. Okay. So we'll also just quickly go past, this is a slide that I use all the time now, which is to say, for anyone who says, oh, we can do this through reform, no, we can't, because this slide is telling us nothing is working. Nothing is working. We can talk as much as we like about everything that we're doing as human beings to change it, but look at this rise in temperature. Look at the greenhouse gases that are going into the atmosphere. And so that tells us that we haven't hit what it is that we need to do. And that thing that we need to do, it's directly connected to economics, right? So all of us have to be very, very clear on that. If we're going to tell the private sector, you have to get off fossil fuels, right? You have to stop mining your coal. What's the first thing they're going to say to us? There's no way I can because it's going to take our profit. There's no way I can stop because there's a certain number of people who are working in that mine. And so we are continually having to look at the science and to tell those who are in the private sector, we are damaging the very ecosystems that allow you to even have an economy. To even have an economy, you have to have a healthy ecosystem and a healthy planet, living planet. So your argument doesn't hold water. You have to change what you are doing. Yep. So it helps us to make those arguments if we know that it is about money, that it is about economics. Okay. And then of course, it's about 1.5, right? And the greenhouse gas, the trajectory that we're on. Can we stay on the right path? Can we stay on 1.5 degree of warming? Or are we already moving toward off that path? Are we already moving towards 2 degrees? Are we moving towards 3 degrees? Because we know from all our free schools and from all our work on our various, networks, that if we get off 1.5, we are saying that the lives of Pacific people in small atoll states don't matter. That's the case that the world is saying to us. And that's why one of our ambassadors said just the other week in the Commission on the Status of Women, do you understand that 1.5 is the Pacific's bottom line? And it's a bottom line because of ecology. It's a bottom line because of economics. Look at all the loss and damage that will be faced by the people of the Pacific and climate frontline people over the next 50 to 100 years. This is 7 generations at least of people who are affected. So it is an economic issue, yep, as much as it is about health and everything else. Okay, then it's also about privilege and oppression, right? And we're starting to get to know this coin model very well. And the very fact that they use coins is important, because what they're saying is you get your money and power from these coins, right? The fact that I can speak English well, that's giving me some privilege. The fact that we live in either Suva or Nandi might give us privilege. The fact that someone doesn't live close to where the capital is might give them less privilege. And that is about what? That is about coins. That is about power. And so we have to work out how we negotiate that as the people who might have less power, but also those with more power, what are you doing to help? And so, for instance, one of our sets of work that we're doing here at Diva for Equality is called From Poverty to Power. And another set we're doing is called Just Fixes. So we're trying to be really practical about it and say, if I hold 4 coins and you only hold 1, how do we make sure that we're working out how to share that equitably? What is it that we have to do about the system to help? It might be as practical as, and we've already just been talking about this in the last 2 meetings. If you don't have a CV, for instance, then we should be helping you get one. That's the use of one of our coins, right? We're saying we are going to help you to do that. If you are able to give someone a reference, if you are able to, so for instance, where we have 2 of our staff members who are they've just arrived in Kandavu this morning. Why have they gone to an outer island? Because the women there couldn't get coconuts, for the coconut shoots, and they need it because they lost a lot of them at the last 2 cyclones that came through. So if we have access to that, it's like using your extra coins. You're going, you're taking it, you're doing all the logistics work, you're helping maybe to pay for it, so that those who have less coins are able to be part of development more than they were. And that's a really practical example of what it means to do justice work, economic justice work. And I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but to say you and I all know it's not the simple binary that, you know, men have more power, women don't have power. It's about all those complexities that are part of being who you are, and whether that rises or falls in terms of your privilege and power. And then we've got to do this issue of what are those things, what are the ideas that help us to work better on economics? I can do better economics if I'm able to make my own decisions, right? Because if my body is broken, I won't be making good decisions every day. So if I have more privilege, I should be helping you. If you are being, if someone is hurting you or harming you, I should be working to stop that. That's about helping someone to have more bodily autonomy so that they can do their own work on economics or anything else. Intersectionality, inclusivity, and interlinkage, the same thing. I'm not going to spend too much time on that. What about what kinds of work are required for us to have economic justice? So just look at just the first dot point, right? If we're thinking about material and structural work, I keep saying this, but on the point of economics, it's incredibly important. If you are just doing work that is about communications or that is about sharing information, be careful, because people need to see that there are changes in their lives. It doesn't mean that you're with them every day. It doesn't mean that you take over all aspects of their lives. Everybody needs to have their own independent action. We all know that. But and we even heard it in Zamari's poem, right? This is not about just receiving things. It is about negotiating on the material side of things, on the everyday, and then also doing the medium and long-term work together. So you're doing all of that as economic justice work together. So sometimes it's going to be about the quick action, but sometimes it's going to be about getting to know each other, being in relationship, building the sets of trust, and saying, but you and I can help each other. Because it's a danger when it starts to be just charity-based. I will help you. That's why there's always a discussion at DIVA about what is the responsibility of those who are in our networks, in our systems. Because if we're not talking like that, then we're just doing oh, poor you, here is some economic help for you. That's not helping you, and that's not good and healthy for us either. So we're continually negotiating with people as individuals. Yep. So let's keep thinking about what are the ways that we can work on economic justice together. And you can tell us some of what you're working on in your own ways. And what's this next set of slides that we're going into is going to look at economies and economic systems a little more deeply. And one of the sets of a wonderful African philosopher and activist who was assassinated, actually, called Frantz Fanon, was about the fact that imperialism, that colonialism, that racism leaves behind it, even when it's gone, it leaves some of the rot, the damage that we have to, all of us, pick up and find in ourselves, find in our relationships, find in our organizations, in our communities, in the way we think and act with each other. Because, you know, what happens with these things is it becomes part of us. And before you know it, you're telling everybody it's your culture. But actually, it might not be your culture. It might be something that you have taken from the oppressor and have now made it your own. We all know about some of the ways that we oppress each other more than even outsiders do. And that set of work is also economic justice work. I just had a conversation with someone who was saying that their family weren't supporting them in order to go out and get education. And the reason for that was that they wanted to keep them close so that they can do the household work. That is also an economic decision that is being made within that household so that that person becomes almost like a servant. And you're stopping them from being able to go on and get something, some qualification that they might be very, very good at because it serves your own purpose. That's what imperialists do too, right? That's what colonialists do too. They often will act like they're your best friend, but really what they're doing is keeping you under control and doing it in very, very quiet, subtle ways. Okay, so imperialism leaves behind the germs of rot that we must clinically detect and remove, not only from our land, but from our minds as well. Frantz Fanon. Eh? And the point that I wanted to make here is that just as we talked about social movements in the last set of work, we are both the individual, and so our economic needs matter. And then we are also the entire ocean, right? The entire planet. We work with other social movements to make change. So we are both the one and the many at the same time when we are talking about economics. And we should try and keep that in our heads and in our hearts and in the way we work, is that we are all those things.